All right, so everybody understands in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, expulsions for Table 9A. Okay, column 5, A, B, C, D. First thing is 5A is total removals. It has nothing to do with the number of days. So a student could be removed 5 times throughout the year, and that could count for 52 days. All we want to see is five removals. So it's 5, or maybe I said 10, I can't remember what I said, but it's total number of removals only. And then columns B, C, and D are the total number of days. But again, we're not asking for the days, we're just asking for, is it up to 1 day? Is it 2 to 10 days? Is it greater than 10 days? And again, if a student is removed for less than a half a day, it does not get reported. Anything from a half up to 1 is 1. Again, I have it there. If it's more than 0.5 and less than 1.5, it's between 2 and 10. And again, all this information is also in the resource guide on the special data reporting website, and I think I have a link to that at the end. So all of this is all based on Table 9A. So one of the things that we did, we sent a report out that everyone should have received, every LEA, comparing all these columns per student, or actually total columns. I'm sorry, we didn't do it per student. Added up all the columns from your Table 9A that you sent to your IU. Then we compared that with what was in Safe Schools, and I'll get to the report that we used for that. Sent that out to all the LEAs, had them take a look at it. Again, we couldn't change the data. This was based on 1920 data, but just take a look at all those numbers. And if there were discrepancies, why were there discrepancies? So I don't know how long we've been doing this, a few months, maybe more. And I came up with a list of reasons why the data doesn't match. Oh, sorry, I missed a slide. Primary placement type. This field is on Table 9A. This field is in the Safe Schools template. This field is in the special ed template as well. So if you have a student that you're now educating that was placed in a residential facility or group home by a non-educational agency, make sure you use the Y in this field. So if their court place or children and youth puts that student in a placement and you're now educating, make sure you put a Y in there. That's for every collection, all collections we have. That's the July collection, the Safe Schools collection, Table 9A, and 12-1. I won't get into exactly why, but when we do calculations on significant disproportionality, if you're not familiar with what significant disproportionality is, we have 14 areas where we compare data over 3 years. And we do placement and identification, and that's pulled from 12-1, and then all the discipline is pulled from Table 9A. And if we find that an LEA over 3 consecutive years has give a threshold, a risk ratio that we have, then that LEA is flagged for significant disproportionality. And what that means is the LEA has to take 15% of their IDEA funds and put that specifically toward fixing whatever the issue is. In this case, we're talking about discipline. So keep that in mind. Coming up soon, I don't know exactly when, we will have your superintendent actually will get an email, and we have a dashboard set up, a data dashboard that will show you all your information related to significant disproportionality. Again, you have to be flagged for 3 consecutive years. Point of primary placement type is if you have students in this situation, they are removed from the calculation. Then that's for discipline, for placement, and for identification. So pay attention to that field. Again, it's in every collection we have. All right, so the next slide will be all the issues that came up when comparing your 9A data to your Safe School data. The biggest one, by far, is reportable versus non-reportable offenses. And I'm going to get in, I have slides on just about all these. But the point of this one is, so there's quote reportable, which is not the right word, offenses that have a number, 1 through, I don't know, 50 something. And then at the end, there's 2 other codes, codes A and C. That's for student code of conduct and academic code of conduct. Those are reportable. Every incident, regardless of what the offense was, should be reported if it's an S3 through S9 code, which is all the suspensions and expulsions. In some cases, I was told it's the vendor isn't pulling that information correct. Now, we've talked to the vendors about this, and they may not be using the reportable, non-reportable issues, and there's some little bit of issues on why they're not doing that, and we'll get into that too. Another big one is students are not marked as a student with an IEP on the incident offender template. So at the time of the incident, did the student have an IEP at the time of the incident? So when you check that box, there's other fields that are required, primary disability, and then where the sending district or charter school. There's sometimes issues between communication between the special ed office and the building principal. Sometimes the special ed office doesn't know about a specific incident or removal. So there has to be some communication between the two. Another big one, and then this goes into students, outplaced students. There's times where a student is outplaced in a non-PIMS reporting entity. They're disciplined. The entity sends that information back to the LEA, but sometimes it never gets to the special ed office.
Dan, you have a question?
Okay, can I talk a little more about 1A, the difference between IEP team discipline? For example, we just had a drug incident. Did the manifestation, which the incident was not a manifestation, he would have otherwise been fine. If the student was removed to an alternative, that's, you know what, we'll get back to that one. I don't know if Jody, if you know the answer to that one, but we'll get back to that one. Yeah, we'll get back to that, sorry. Where was I? Okay, so outplaced students. Another big issue is, again, these are students that are disciplined in a non-PIMS reporting entity. So the special ed office or the LEA will be notified that this student had a removal, had an incident. The problem is there's not enough information to report that in PIMS, in Safe Schools, by the LEA that placed that student there. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. Another one, discipline for non-resident students not reported by the LEA imposing the discipline. I will get into that too. In most cases, if you maybe have a consortium class in your building, and you as that LEA that's educating impose discipline on a student that is not a student that is a resident of your district. Yes, you inform the district about that, but if it's determined that you make the decision on what the removal is going to be, you as that educating and imposing discipline LEA should be reporting that in PIMS. Students moving out out of the district during the year, they still get reported. Report the incident if they were special ed at the time of the incident, should all be reported. And then I had some where LEAs didn't submit to Safe Schools at all, which there were some zeros in there. So report as best you can. There are some situations where the Safe Schools data and the Table 9A data is in the same system. In a lot of cases, it's not, or in some cases it is. But again, that reportable, non-reportable, I've heard people talk about different systems where that's a checkbox in their system. They're all reportable. If it's an S3 through an S9, any in-school or out-of-school suspension or expulsion, it is reportable if it's on that list, 1 through 54 and A and C. Now we'll go into some specifics on this. Okay, so first is who reports. So in most cases, it's the entity that imposes the discipline. So I talked about a consortium classroom. This is a little different. It's an IU classroom. At an IU, the IU imposes the discipline. Yes, they notify the district or charter school, but they, the IU, would enter the information in PIMS. Now, I've heard over the years, there've been some cases where the IU will let the LEA know, you should report this in Safe Schools, or we will report it in Safe Schools. But usually they know exactly who should report based on the situation. There's some IUs that are IU buildings. There's some situations where the student is in a licensed private academic or some other facility, but the IU educates. So there's different situations, but in general, if you're a school district, a charter school, an IU, or a CTC, and you impose discipline, you should be reporting. And always remember to get the field of the sending district or charter school, make sure that's correct. Double check, it's an AUN number, so double check you have the correct number in there. The only time, the other times where the district or residence or charter school will report is, again, that I talked about before, the discipline imposed by those non-PIMS reporting entities. And hopefully later on, I'll talk about a form that we put together with help from an LEA to get all the fields at a minimum that are required to be able to, for you, the LEA, to submit that in Safe Schools. No questions yet. Okay. Here's where the confusion lies with the A's and the C's code. And this is pulled directly from the PIMS manual. And I have all capitalized and bolded. If there's any discipline incident that the action is S3 through S9, again, that's any suspension, expulsion, it must be reported as an individual incident, not just in the aggregate. And I know there is an aggregate collection where you're collecting just the A's and the A and the C code, the academic code of conduct and student code of conduct in aggregate only. But for special ed purposes, and again, this is for all students, individual record, individual discipline incident for each one of these scenarios. Do not, yes, you do an aggregate, but you must do it individually. Can't stress that enough. That's been the biggest one so far, A's and C's. There's a question about APSs. APSs do not report the Safe Schools, do not report the Safe Schools. So if the APS should be informing you about a student that's been disciplined, and then you would do the same thing. You would put that in Safe Schools. You'd have to get the information that you need to put in Safe Schools, and then it would also go on table 9A. These are the fields and templates that we use to pull the data out to create our table 9A. Again, the big one, student with an IEP. Make sure at the time of the incident, did this student have an IEP? And again, if they did, then we'll ask for primary disability and then the sending district or charter school. And if, by the way, if you're a charter school and you have an incident for a special ed student in that sending district or charter, you put the charter school, you put your LEA in there. The sending, the district of residence is not the sending district if you're a charter school and you're reporting in Safe School. Again, there's field 22, that primary placement type. Make sure if that student is placed by a non-educational agency that you've put a Y in there. We use the injury severity code. That is used for injuries. Infraction code, obviously, we're pulling 1 through 54 and A and C. And then the action code is one of the S codes, and then the duration. So all that information is pulled so we can create a report that I'll get to for table 9A. All right, so I decided to put some scenarios together. Hopefully these all make sense. Okay, first one, special ed student receiving services at their district residence or charter school. Because serious bodily injury to another student, district or the charter imposes a discipline of out-of-school suspension for 5 days. They have no other discipline for the year. This one is fairly straightforward. So yes, there was serious bodily injury. So the injury severity code is a 4, but the student was not placed in an interim alternative setting. So you would not use column 1, A, B, or C, A, B, C, or D in table 9A. Again, if the student, just because the student caused serious bodily injury does not mean you fill out column 1 on table 9A. And again, you're imposing the discipline, so you would put your AUN, the district or charter school, in the sending district charter school field. Questions on that? No. Okay. All right, scenario 2. Special ed student is court placed in a group home receiving services from the IU and IU building. IU imposes 1-day in-school suspension for violating the student code of conduct. The IU notifies the district of residence of the discipline. So we have a IU imposing the discipline at an IU building. They will contact the district of residence. District of residence will fill out table 9A. They were given an in-school suspension for 1 day. So 4C is a Y. That's in-school suspensions for 1 day. They had 1 total removal. 5A is 1. Again, removals is total removals. It's not the days. In this case, it's the same day. It's 1 day. And then 5B is a Y. Again, for total days removed is 1. In this case, the IU is reporting in safe schools. So again, student with an IEP, put in the disability. In field 21, the sending district or charter, they'll enter the AUN of either the district of residence or the charter school. In this case, the student is in a school district, so they'll enter the school district AUN. Student is also court placed in a group home. Again, primary placement type is a Y. There was no injury severity code. S3 is for in-school suspensions, durations 1 day. Next one, special ed students in a licensed private academic. They imposed a discipline on 3 separate occasions. Each case student was using vaping materials. It was an in-school suspension for 1 day, and another in-school suspension for 3.5 days, and out-of-school suspension for 6 days. Licensed private academic contacts the district of residence or charter school. So, licensed private academic cannot report in PIMS. So the district or charter will report for table 9A and for safe schools. If, again, 3 separate incidents. So you have 3 separate disciplinary action codes for 3 separate incidents. Student was not placed by the courts, so primary placement type is a no. You add up for table 9A, you would add up the total number of days for safe schools. Again, it's 3 separate incidents. When we run the reports, we will add up the total number of days. And again, in this case, it's over 10 days. So 5D, column 5D is a Y, which is greater than 10 days. 5A is not a 10, it's 3. Student had 3 separate removals. No questions, Jen. Okay, so I talked about this before. Again, I took all the table 9A data and then ran the Cognos report, table 9A report, and compared those. And all that information was sent out to every LEA to look at the differences, to figure out why. And again, I went over all those reasons before. I talked about, okay, hold on. Let me get through this and I will go back to, I'll go back to it now. Someone's to review scenario 3 again. 5A on table 9A is total number of removals. So this student had 3 separate removals. It's not, you don't list it again, you don't put, it's not number of days. 5A is total number of removals. It totaled up 10.5 days, which is why 5D is a Y.
Dan, there are 2 questions about APS above that question.
Yeah, I got to those already, I think. APSs don't report in safe schools. They should be notifying the district residents or charter school if there's any discipline, and then you as the district would enter that on table 9A and get all the information you need to enter it into safe schools. And again, I might as well mention it now. Tony and I were working on, with the help of an LEA, working on a spreadsheet that has, at a minimum, every field that is needed by template in safe schools. And what we did was, I can show it. Should I show it, Tony? I guess I could show it. I don't have enough to show, but anyway, each.
Couldn't hurt.
Okay.
I can dig up my copy if you'd like.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. So what we did was we have every field in every discipline template that's needed to report an incident in safe schools at a minimum. And with every field, if there's a list of valid values, we list all those values. So Tony, you can let me know when you have that and I will stop sharing, or yeah, I'll stop sharing if you want to share. You want me to do that now?
No, go ahead. It may take me a minute to find it.
Okay. Okay, so everybody understands scenario 3. Again, 5A is total number of removals. It's never days. 5B, C, and D, again, are not our number of days, but we're just asking for a yes or a no. Was it up to 1 day? Was it 2 to 10 days? Was it greater than 10 days? All right, back to the Cognos report.
I found it.
Okay. Let me get through this and I'll give it to you. 2 reports out there. Table 9A, and what table 9A does, it looks exactly like the table 9A that has all the fields in there that you submit to the IUs that then gets submitted to us. It shows the reporting LEA and then the district of residence or charter schools. So you will see students that were reported, that are your students that were reported by some other LEA. And that's just, if you want to break that down, there's a separate report, table 9A, special ed students discipline reported by other LEAs. So in the second example about the student who was disciplined at an IU by an IU building, the IU would enter that information in. You would see that on your table 9A, and in the reporting LEA, it would show the AUN and name of the intermediate unit that imposed the discipline and reported in 9A. Those should match. And again, we know that they didn't. Some did. Some were right on. Some were very close. In most cases, LEAs figured out what the difference was and why there was a difference. So I think it'll be a lot better this year. Now, this year is a little different because there's probably not a lot of discipline in a lot of LEAs going on. So I don't, based on that, I don't see us removing the submission of table 9A, definitely not this year and probably not next year, just because I don't think there'll be enough data to compare. But again, think about where all this information is being stored. Yes, you have some way that you're reporting to Safe Schools, and you might have another way that you're reporting for 9A. Do you have it in the same system? Do you not? Are you definitely checking that? The big one is that non-state reportable versus not state reportable. All those A's and C's, I can't stress this enough because that was the biggest issue that we had based on 1920 data, was LEAs not checking the state reportable, putting those A's and C's only in the aggregate and not putting them in as individual incidents. One thing to do if you have separate systems, before you report or throughout the year at any point, run what your table 9A would look like. Have the Safe Schools run what it would look like with just your special ed students, see what it looks like. Upload the information and then run that table 9A Cognos report. Again, they should match. If they don't, you can easily look at it student by student and figure out what the discrepancy is and why there's a discrepancy. Was the report sent to PIMS administrators? This was sent to all the IU data managers, who then would have sent it to their special ed contact at their LEA. So if you do not get that, then you can talk to your special ed person at your LEA. If someone needs it sent again or didn't receive it, let me know, and we'll make sure you get that. Got a question. Trying to find errors or differences between Safe Schools and Table 9A can be very time consuming, particularly if you use two different systems. Are you able to create a Cognos report that would pull special ed students and, sorry, chat keeps moving, and information from various Safe Schools template into one file? It moved again for comparisons with 9A. Stacy, I don't, other than if you run the Cognos 9A, it pulls. Let me go back. Right there. Those are all the fields that are pulled from 9A. So those are the big fields. If you have a discrepancy, those are the first things you should look at. Again, one of the big ones was that field 2 offender type. I'm sorry, field 5 offender type checked as a student with the IEP at the time of the incident.
Okay. Yeah, Dan, if I can jump in there, Stacy's asking about a Cognos report that would pull all these together. We don't have anything right now that will do this, and we're still in the midst of transferring all of our reports to a new system. So I wouldn't expect anything like this to happen soon. Although it's not beyond the realm of possibility once we get everything migrated over to add some reports to make this a little bit easier.
And the other question, is it possible to have Safe Schools open earlier in the sandbox?
Yeah, Marion, we can look into that. I'll have to check with with Teresa, the person that actually runs the mechanics behind all that, but I think that's something we can do.
Another question, and we're aware of this one and we are working on it. Well, I'll just read the question. When we run Cognos 9A, it is not running a few students correctly. If the student has two behaviors linked to one incident, it's counting 5A as two separate removals instead of one. And I'm sure what it's also doing, if the student, so the situation is the student has two separate incidents and together there's one removal. So right now we have to work on the report, on the logic on the report to make sure that gets fixed, but we are working on that, and hopefully by the time that the information gets pulled or it's sent into Safe Schools, we'll have that updated. But again, we know that is an issue and we are definitely working on that. Repeat what you just said about what special ed folks got. Okay, so again, I took entire state, every LEA, took all their information from table 9A, cumulative. So added up, here's how many students were reported in table 9A. Here's how many had in-school suspension 1 day or less. Here's how many had out-of-school suspension, all the categories. And then here's total number of removals reported. All that was from table 9A. Then I took the same information by running the Cognos 9A report and then put that information in a column right next to it. So in table 9A, if you had 42 students reported for table 9A, when I run the Cognos report, maybe you had 35 students. And again, we're pulling it all from these fields right here. The big one is student with an IEP. So that's the comparison that was sent to all the IU data managers, who then sent them all to all the special ed staff at the local LEAs. So again, if you did not get that, you can contact me, or you can contact your IU data manager and they'll make sure you get that. I have 379 students with IEP reported in safe schools and 373 in table 9A. Are these the same students, or should I be looking into it? If you have your 9A, you have it in a spreadsheet, and then you have your, if you run that Cognos report, it will run it by student. And you just do a quick comparison between those two spreadsheets, you'll know right away what student, which students are missing. Or maybe there's situations where you have 3 students on table 9A that you didn't have in safe schools. And maybe you have 7 students in safe schools that you didn't have on table 9A. So that's the first thing I would do. Just compare those student IDs and see which are missing from each report. And that'll help you figure out why they may or may not have been on 9A, or may not have been in safe school. Did I hit all the questions so far?
It looks that way, Dan, and I have that form ready to go if you want to do that now. Okay, can you see the form okay, Dan?
Yep.
All right. I'm not going to go through the whole form just because I think we're starting to get a little tight on time here, but just to show you, you know, how we kind of thought this would work. You'll have a place to put in, you know, the values that don't have fixed codes. You'll have a place to write them in, like the date of the incident, the time of the incident. When we get to fields that have specific codes, we have those codes listed here for you. You won't have to go to the manual to look them up. And you'll just put in, you know, the appropriate code somewhere in this area. We may have you do a checkbox. We may have you write the number 1 in here. That's not the number 1. We're still developing this. Incident place code, the same kind of thing. We'll come down here to some of the other required fields for the offender data. Information about the infraction itself. Please note that for infractions, you'll list all that apply here. If there are multiple infractions, list each one here. Let's see, disciplinary sanction. You'll have the ability to put the duration right in next to the appropriate sanction code. So a 5-day out-of-school suspension would look just like that. And there's really not much there we can do without repeating. So Dan, I'm going to stop there. And if we have any questions, we can come back to it.